Welcome back for another episode of Why Are We Like This, the podcast that treats Florida like the active crime scene that it is. I am your host, David Quinones, and I am joined by your fellow host, Tomas Kennedy. Hey, Tomas.
Hey, we're fluoride pill, baby. Let's go.
We're fluoride pill.
Let's live to fight another day.
Thanks to our reliably unreliable county mayor.
Our estrogen levels will remain high, thank God.
The poison right up to the gullet. And we are also joined by our other co-host. Don't ask him who was president in 2008 if you don't want the actual answer. It's Gerald Doherty. Hey, Gerald.
Hello. Trump promised us green land, but my K is a Red Sea. Let me tell you.
Got him. I'm putting a snare in there. I'm dropping a snare, a rim shot in there. So, guys, our first news and notes entry is a tale of two erstwhile friends, allies, compadres who now find themselves at loggerheads, pawns in an international dispute. A failing, once prosperous relationship, like most failing relationships. The signs have been there for a while, but it all started with a cake. From the Tampa Bay Times, Stephanie Hayes, in March 14th, like a month ago. This is from the Tampa Bay Times. Why won't Publix put a Canadian flag on a cake? Publix, it seems, will no longer decorate a cake with a Canadian flag or any flag that's not American. I say it seems because the company won't fully explain a recent series of curious cake events. Those are my favorite type of cake events. A quest for answers has landed me with vanilla quarter sheet cake on my kitchen counter. It bears the words, "Welcome Canadian snowbirds," in loopy red icing, but no maple leaf.
Wait, I have to do it. Somebody needs to go and try to say, put an Israeli flag on my cake.
That was exactly what I thought. Like going to like Aventura and the Aventura Publix and doing an Israeli flag. Yeah. See if they say no. Yeah. The note that was attached to Stephanie's cake says, "Can't do other flags, just American flag."
We'll see.
So here's how we got to this suggestively Canadian, but not too Canadian cake. It is 2025. Donald Trump is president. He's been picking on Canada for reasons as dense as buttercream, flip-flopping on tariff threats that have assailed the stock market. At the same time, Trump seems obsessed with claiming Canada for America the way one purchases a new sofa. Canada is fighting back, and outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has encouraged Canadians not to visit us to the south. Many Canadians are part-time Floridians. We year-rounders tease snowbirds and a lovingly way, blah, 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 simple hair rumpling. But she makes the point that a reader reached out to her last month, which would have been February because this was written in March, when the dumbest trade war in history was heating up. For the past few years, they said their friend had ordered a Canadian flag cake party for some party they were throwing. This year, the host went to Winn-Dixie, which declined to do it. The host then went to two Publix stores. That's probably just because Winn-Dixie sucks. They don't know how to make it. The host went to two Publix stores where employees said they weren't allowed to frost the flag. So this cake catastrophe is only worsened in the intervening months. Axios has been reporting. This is me now talking. We're moving away from Stephanie's column. Axios reported that Canadian tourism to Florida and the U.S. overall is cratering, specifically tourism-dependent Florida. Canada only really represents about 2% of Florida tourism. The Globe and Mail reports that battered by a weak dollar and shocked by U.S. politics, Canadians are getting rid of their Florida homes at an inopportune time. Meanwhile, Canada is actively fighting back in the court of public opinion. If you've been driving around Longwood, Orlando, Central Florida, you might have seen some billboards stating that tariffs are a tax paid at the gas pump, which is the very polite but stern tone could have told you that it's Canadian. And it was written by a Canadian activist and not our own Tomas Kennedy, who uses much more choice language when he's got copy to write for billboards. And so since his March 5th State of the State address, Ron DeSantis has been pretty antagonistic towards Canada, telling them, fine, leave, we don't care. But yeah, I don't know. We wanted to talk about Canada, so I just wanted to give us a little intro to talk about it.
One of the main purchasers of Florida orange juice, which is, by the way, a decrepit industry. Back in, I think 1992, we used to produce about 240 million boxes of oranges a year. Now we produce about 12 million. 12 million. From 240 million 3 decades ago to 12 million now. And we're antagonizing one of the main purchasers of Florida orange juice. Brilliant. Super smart guys running the state.
Gerald,
yes.
What is your impression of the import of Florida versus Canada to the Florida economy? I mean, I don't know. DeSantis, like I say,
you guys are not really going ham on maple syrup up there. I could say up here in New York, you start to see it a little bit in the grocery store, but I don't know how much Canadian bacon and maple syrup are you guys really scarfing in Florida?
Well, I'm doing my share. I'm doing my part.
All
okay.
Right. Sorry, David.
I can't speak for everyone else.
I mean, I guess there's like a lot of bagel places and like breakfast delis and stuff like that in South Florida. They always have like maple syrup there.
Yeah, and primarily the lumber that comes from Florida, that comes from Canada into Florida, as we've touched on before, is going to drive up the cost of construction. Like that's the main import with Canada and Mexico, as far as Florida goes, is the cost of aluminum, the cost of lumber. Fossil. They are a big oil exporter, like fossil fuels. Like this touches a lot of industries in Florida that are going to make the cost of goods go up.
And it's not just Florida. I mean, I have an
Yeah,
article here from Politico with a quote from Carney himself, who's going to be
the next prime.
the next prime in Canada. Against all odds.
We
Well,
should.
let's talk about that. That's another
Yeah,
piece of the political puzzle we wanted to discuss, is like the downward effect of Trump, of MAGA, and Trump 2 on the Canadian political system.
yeah.
Let me read this quote, because this is why he's going to be prime, because he's fucking based. Quote, the old relationship we have with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over, Carney declared on March 27. We must fundamentally reimagine our economy. We will need to ensure that Canada can succeed in a drastically different world. I mean, is over. Quote. I mean, that is harsh language, right?
This is like pivot to China language. Like
Yeah.
that's what you're signaling.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously bellicose for election purposes. Let's see
Yes.
how it actually looks like post-election. But I mean, this is a 60-year relationship that involved intelligence operations, surveillance, fighting multiple wars, joint economic zone, free trade, automobile assembly, the purchases of goods, border control management. I mean, wow, it's just blown up. It's over in 3
It's over.
weeks.
Sharing one of the largest borders it might be the largest border in the Americas, right? In our hemisphere, like it is the largest border.
The only other one that I could see is either the U.S. Southern Mexico border, but I believe the Canadian border is bigger. And the other one that could compare, it's Argentina and Chile.
Yeah, Argentina and Chile, because it's so long.
Yeah, but I don't think it's as big either.
Well, Gerald, my understanding of I'm not like a great knower of Canadian politics. My big thing is I just want to make sure there's no like tariffs or supply chain problems with the next season of Shoresy or my reruns of Letterkenny. But I don't really know much about Canadian politics beyond the fact that forever they had a sort of typical liberal, very similar to us, a liberal and a conservative wing of voters. And only in recent years, since around 2020, had they had this weird injection of our flavor of conservatism, weird bugbear conservatism, like following a crazy cult leader lady in a Winnebago around the country who said she was the queen of Canada and England, type of QAnon style MAGA conservatism. And it seems like Trump, one of the effects of Trump too, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, the trucker alliance that they had up there is one example of it. And it seems like that is starting to dissipate in Canada in an unpopular reaction to
because those stupid ass truckers are the ones that are getting fucked by these tariffs.
Right. Exactly.
So I got to give credit to my sibling Braden, who said something to the effect of, when people used to say that America is the world's leading cultural exporter, they used to mean Hollywood, but now they mean politics. Like anything that happens in American politics, in 6 months, you can bet it'll be somewhere in the Anglophone countries.
Or Argentina.
Yep. Or Argentina.
It's so fucking annoying.
So to give people a snapshot, back in October, Justin Trudeau had to step down because it was very clear that him seeking a third term as prime minister, overseeing, like in any other country post-COVID, there was a massive cost of living crisis, compounding an already existent housing crisis, where the cost of owning a home, especially in near any metropolitan area where people might commute to work, was becoming more and more unaffordable. On top of that, a carbon tax that was passed, I believe, in 2018 or 2019, was scheduled to go up this year, compounding the already existent cost of living crisis. Was going to be a tax hike. The combination of these two was political suicide, basically. So Trudeau, reading the room, stepped down. Instantly, a man named Pierre Poilievre, who is sort of like a Canadian Scott Walker type, was running on an Axe the Tax campaign, basically running fully on, like any opposition party right now who's trying to get in, is running a full-on cost of living campaign. But the cost of living campaign he's running is, I want to cut taxes, dereg, drill baby, basically any, Sarah Palin on forward.
Yeah, bog standard conservative stuff.
Right, basically, but just with a Canadian polite, panache on it. Enter Donald Trump, who is threatened not only to slap tariffs on Canada, but revoke their sovereignty. And the cause of Canadian nationalism went from the truckers to essentially the globalists. The cause of any maple leaf bearing individual has now become not one of the Conservative Party, but of the Liberal Party in objection to Donald Trump. And this was hastened by the election of Mark Carney to Prime Minister designate, soon to be just prime minister if you look at any of the polls that are coming out now. And the reason is because this is a guy who, up until Trump's election, would have been easy for them to caricature, easy for them to pillory as he's a Davos creature, he's, banker, globalist, probably drinking the blood of children, adrenochrome, what have you. It would all be there as a layup. And yet, because of Trump's chaotic policies and his deliberately antagonistic relationship with Canada, he's basically leaning into that by saying, yes, I am like the well-connected, like, finance man, and isn't that exactly what you want in this current moment? Don't you want the steady hand? Don't you want the one who has all these people, in his phone? And he's being rewarded with it at the polls. And the only thing that the Conservative Party have to respond to him is that he's a lib, basically that he's a lib, that he like thinks climate change is real, that he, believes in it. Basically, if you want to get the picture of what both the conservatives and liberals say about Mark Carney, do you remember that picture of Mitt Romney during George Floyd, when he took the picture and said Black Lives Matter with the mask and everything? He attended one of the protest.
Yes,
That is basically like the Bart Simpson running for student council picture, where the libs are like, and the conservatives are both saying this picture of Mitt Romney, that is basically Mark Carney. Like, they both agree on one thing, and it's a question of how you feel about that picture. Do you like the banker who pays lip service to social progressivism, or don't you? And in Canada, as it turns out, especially with Donald Trump threatening to make them a 51st state, they like that type of leader very, very much. So essentially, this is all as far as any, rising right wing in Canada, Donald Trump has all but collapsed that project. On top of it, people's fears of recession have mounted since, we'll say, the third week of February, also due to, and that has allowed Carney to also say, the last time there was a recession, I was the one helping us steer us through it as governor of the Bank of Canada. So even if a recession does happen, aren't I the type of guy he would want managing it, having already done so after the collapse of Lehman Brothers? So everything that Donald Trump has done has played directly into the prospects for a robust third term for the Liberal Party, basically only due to Justin Trudeau deciding to step down from power when it was very clear well in advance he was going to lose, which, hey, wouldn't that have been nice for us down here?
Yeah, and I mean, the aggression against Canadian territorial integrity, like, it is insane. I mean, I was reading an article about how in one of his meetings with Trudeau, Trump wanted to renegotiate the treaty that sets the demarcation of the U.S.-Canadian border to the benefit of
the lower 48th.
And like, I'm actually rereading the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and I hate to be hyperbolic, but like, that shit is Hitlerian. Like, that shit is like Czechoslovakia in like 1938. You know what I mean? I'm not saying he's going to actually do it, and it might just be a bluff, some idiotic, like, tough guy bluff for the economic negotiations, but like, that is a bizarre and really worrisome development.
Really aggressive.
Like, the United States just like being like, no, we want to extend the border demarcation into your territory. And actually, he went beyond that afterwards. He said, we just want to annex the whole country.
Yeah.
And he has not dropped. And I know that whenever there's like two different camps on the conservative side in terms of like the narrative or the management of the story whenever he does these things. And one is always like, well, this is part of the deal. He's being like, coy, and this is chess and shit like that. And then there's the other side, which is like, no, yeah, that's the only path forward for Canada. is if they are like apart. And it must be a beautiful ideology to be a part of, because like you never have to be wrong and it doesn't matter that you're not right. So like it's brilliant. It's a brilliant like like coordination. I like, to your point, T, like I very rare. I hate the like histrionic, like you'll never catch, I think, any of the three of us standing up and like doing the lib like this is not normal, but like this is not normal. This is really not normal. Like it really feels weird to have to do that sometimes. But like, yeah, this is really not normal. So we leave Canada behind, just like the rest of the country is apparently in the process of doing, and
to further embrace them.
To further embrace
soon.
I want to bring us a little bit closer to home for our second news and notes. This one I was a little bit of a curveball. I didn't really prep you guys for this, but I have to ask you, otherwise I will get yelled at by my wife. Okay. So our next entry comes from the Capitol, where Tomas is right now, where all manner of sinister legislation is wending its way through the House and Senate. But this one has struck a chord with me personally. This report from clickorlando.com's Troy Smith, this was just the best article I could find about it. It's not really being covered a lot, and I really want to get specifically Tomas's thoughts on the practicalities of it. Florida House advances budget bill reducing bonuses for AP course enrollment. Senate state budget bill approved by the Florida House on Wednesday could lead to a significant reduction in how much funding school districts receive for students enrolled in advanced placement courses, prompting criticism from Democrats who argue the change could diminish college readiness in public schools. The legislation is Senate Bill 7030. It includes a provision to cut by 50% the amount Florida reimburses school districts for students who score high enough on AP, International Baccalaureate, Advanced International Certificate, all the like smart kid shit, and dual enrollment exams to earn college credit. The quote from Jenna Persons Malika, the Republican from Fort Myers, who's sort of defending this bill, is, "What we are reducing is the value of an add-on weight that only certain students generate with certain scores. Last year, only 30% of the students who sat for these programs generated that add-on weight." And Tomas, I see this as sort of part and parcel with like the Daniela Levine Cava address that we talked about last week, which is like this new permission structure that DOJ has broadly created across all levels of government, where politicians, I think they've always secretly sort of harbored, maybe not so secretly, harbored the desire to reduce services, privatize, cut budgets. Elon Musk has primed the pump to make constituents sort of amenable to it and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense that they're going to do this thing that makes no fucking sense. And now they have the cover to do it, and they can dovetail it with their own priorities. And in this case, it's the continued kneecapping of public schools. But I'm curious as to your insights and like what you think about if this has been landed on your radar.
So I'm here doing immigration stuff, so this is not something that I follow closely. I mean, occasionally I'll go into a committee or testify or wave against the bill if asked by some of our ecosystem allies. But I was talking with some folks that do, I don't want to name them, but some folks that do, public education work here in the legislature, lobbying on behalf of public schools. There's another bill that I don't know it very well, but this is basically like, the contours around it. It would allow, I believe, 50% of the voting members of a school, meaning the parents, vote to have that school, a public school, become a charter school. That's what would happen.
Wow.
Jesus
it would
Christ.
basically be given to the municipality
to convert into a charter school.
Would basically bring in a charter management groups to convert it into a charter school. Horrible. Yeah, so
they tried this a few years ago in Jefferson County. It was a disaster. Like Jefferson County, they ran they handed the whole school system over to charters, and it was whatever. It was, I mean, I could go through all of it. It was as Bakeman wrote about it, but it was a disaster.
As a lot of Wall Street bros that voted for Trump because they wanted to say slurs at work are finding out. Sometimes you gotta learn things the hard way.
Jesus Christ.
Finding out. Sometimes you gotta learn things the hard way, and in Florida, we the problem is we don't learn. That's the problem.
This goes back to a conversation that we had on an episode like a long time ago, like right at the beginning when we had a guest on talking about education, and I was sharing my feeling that has only grown in that like last 2.5 years or whatever, which is like there's an entire like section or stratosphere of public school parents that they kind of want, and they are successfully doing it, by the way, pick off and bring into the charter and private school ecosystem. And like that they're trying to create this like this hard push in your back where you feel like it's just everything is working against you in the public system. Everything is like it's bad, even for people like my wife and I who are like core deep believers in public schooling as like a principle. Like in practice, they just make it untenable.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. If I had a kid, in Florida, I don't know if I would send them to public school in South Florida. There's specific ones that are good, but it's not because I don't believe in public schools. It's because it's like we talked. They have sabotaged most of them and defunded them, and made the teaching profession such a punishment that the education is bad.
Well, on to our main topic, boys. We have officially transitioned from the golden age of fraud to the gilded age of fraud.
Whoa.
Up until now, there was, at least some sport to pulling off large scale white collar financial crimes. If you were misappropriating funds, market manipulation, money laundering, part of what makes these things so much fun to do is the tiny sliver of a chance that you might get caught. But that sliver has officially been sunsetted this week. Amid undulating and schizophrenic tariff rollouts and rollbacks, a group of Trump insiders were able to capitalize on a tariff pause that gave the flailing markets a little key bump of energetic upward momentum. Of course, their big buys at the market's bottom occurred mere minutes before the pause was announced, which was either incredible luck on their part or insider trading at the highest level. The overt market manipulation is the kind of thing that world leaders and their cronies have always benefited from, even before tariffs became the mechanism that they do it. But we could at least expect enough decorum out of them, or shame, that the principal beneficiaries wouldn't, bring it up in polite company. You'd rarely see the disciplined and well-connected fraudsters like Nancy Pelosi or Kelly Loeffler doing touchdown dances in your face, making it rain with ill-gotten gains. But that was then. Now, the morning after Wednesday's Sugar Rush rally, we saw President Trump, flanked by several billionaire friends, crowing about how they'd made off like literal bandits, making billions of dollars in just a few moments. And what does this have to do with Florida? Well, say what you will about our governor, Ron DeSantis. He knows how to read the political winds. He comprehends when it doesn't have to do with him running for president. He comprehends that we have entered this gilded age of impunity, and he knows that if you're on the right side, you can get away with basically anything. And this is my favorite kind of DeSantis story. It's a wife story. I think it's one of all his best stories are wife stories. From the category of flimsy pretexts for our main story, we go to the Tallahassee Democrat with this report. Tensions erupt in the House over DeSantis-backed Hope Florida program's $10 million windfall. For 2 hours on Tuesday, a panel of House lawmakers asked pointed questions of leaders for the state's main health care administration agency. Representative Alex Andrade, who chairs the House Healthcare Budget Subcommittee, didn't like the answers. I'm more stunned than anything else by the responses, the demeanor, the flippancy toward the serious questions that we have, he said. This is an endemic problem in state agencies right now, and it's something that we've got to work on. Siobhan Harris, the secretary for the Agency of Healthcare Administration, called ACA, we'll call it ACA because that's usually what it gets called, had struggled to answer questions on a series of issues related to Hope Florida, a program spearheaded by First Lady Casey DeSantis that tries to connect Floridians receiving welfare and Medicaid with other services to help move them from government assistance. Andrade and other members of the panel expressed alarm over a $10 million that went to Hope Florida as part of a settlement between ACA and Centene, a large provider of services under Florida's Medicaid managed plans. That was like fucking around and misappropriating funds and got dinged for it. So as Harris explained, the overall settlement was $67 million, with $57 million going to ACA. It had to do with overpayments related to the pharmacy benefit managers, she said, but the other $10 million was a donation from Centene to Casey DeSantis's Hope Florida Foundation. So the money never came to ACA and was therefore not state funds reportable to the legislature. I don't know. It's just money that went somewhere else. What do you know?
Okay, right on.
So Andrade maintains that the funds are taxpayer money and the settlement violates state law. Quote, the reference to that $10 million not being taxpayer fund dollars I find offensive. Andrade also raised concerns about Hope Florida getting preferential treatment in the state's Medicaid managed care contracts. Specifically, health care insurers must cooperate with whatever. Another gripe from the committee was this lack of transparency, which kind of dovetailed with friend of the show, Lawrence Maurer, who visited the nonprofit in person last week with a colleague of his. And he posted on Twitter that he and his colleague had just went by the MyFL Family's actual building to get more information on DeSantis' Hope Florida Foundation. It's a nonprofit. The IRS says nonprofits must produce 990 forms and 1023s immediately upon in-person request. Anybody that's worked for a nonprofit in any administrative capacity You know that if you've contracted with them, you know that that's how they have to work. When we asked for those records, Burke's Pushing came out. We explained to him, they showed him like the print off from the IRS's website Q&A. I was like, this is what you have to do. And an hour later, he came out and was just like, yeah, we'll get to you whenever. So, don't hold your breath. And this person did not identify themselves. Yeah. So it's $10 million. I mean, it almost feels like small fry these days with all the billions of dollars of fraud flying back and forth. But I don't know.
You know why I love this story though? Because DeSantis is a guy that has no, unlike Rick Scott, right? Or a lot of these other people in the legislature, he is not a self-made man. He has no individual wealth. I mean, he is actually like a parasite of the state. He has leached off public office since 2012. So the petty grifting is understandable if you're, and there's no allegation that they're personally profiting from this, right? It's just a political patronage thing, right? But it's understandable if you see like the scale of the petty grifting in relation to his personal wealth. And it's also just so funny to me. The reason why it's so funny is because DeSantis and his camp made such a big deal out of the Andrew Gillum corruption scandal, which was so petty. It was like what, like the Hamilton ticket.
It was a trip to Hamilton, to New York to see
Costa
Hamilton,
Rica,
right?
And this motherfucker is like, it's like, we found 10 million that fell off a truck and we put it on this like grifter charity that my wife has that hasn't even filed its paperwork in like the last 2 years. And God knows what they even do to begin with. You know what I mean? So spare me. You guys are just as big a grifters. If not, it's just so funny to me. And the best part of it is that he's being exposed by the Republicans. Like, this is absolutely... And DeSantis said it. He's like, this is Danny Perez and the House leaking against me, and they're the ones feeding this to the reporters. And I have no confirmation of it, but I fully fucking believe it because they're all sick of him. They're sick of his ass. Yep. They're sick of the heavy-handedness. They're sick of the entitlement. They're sick of the authoritarian, dictatorial attitude he has towards the legislative branch. They're sick of his grifter-ass wife. And the fact that he thinks that he can install her as governor to set up some sort of, right-wing DeSantis political dynasty. They're sick of his ass, and they are shivving him in the back, and it's just hilarious to see.
Yeah, and his people are fighting back. Brian Griffin, not the Brian Griffin that we all know and love, but the Brian Griffin who is just like a DeSantis flunky comms guy. He is pushing back on all of these, and he's sort of on all of these claims. He's nitpicking by saying that Lawrence had called the charity Casey DeSantis' charity, and he's saying, oh, it's technically not. There's a lot of this sort of DeSantis pushback at one of our favorite outlets, Florida Voice News, who just published yesterday, it looks like, Hope Florida Foundation addresses missing tax documents amid heightened public scrutiny. Joshua Hay, board chairman of Hope Florida Foundation, is responding to the mounting questions that you outlined, Tomas, from media outlets about his missing forms. And he's saying that the Hope Florida Foundation is in the process of creating its relevant tax documents. The foundation expects to have the documents available for public inspection within the next 10 days. So I guess it was just like, let's go get it done.
And DeSantis was on a press conference, and he was like, they're going after my wife's foundation over some paperwork missing? What about the important work that my wife's foundation does? And God knows what the fuck that foundation does.
He knows what they're actually doing.
But do you think he would say the same thing over an immigration service provider that didn't file, or any sort of nonprofit service provider in the state that helped, for example, unaccompanied minors? They would come down on these groups so fucking hard. They would throw the book at them. But when it's his wife's foundation, they're coming after me over missing tax documents? You guys are cherry picking like that? Fuck you, dude. Fuck you, anti-grifter wife.
I was going to ask you, Gerald, do you think he would be so, sort of forgiving if this was something that like the Clinton Foundation had been involved in?
I've been doing a reread of the Clintons because I am a glutton for punishment. And so it was top of my mind when we were talking about this in the chat. When Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, Hillary was working as First Lady of Arkansas at Rose Law Firm. She wanted to keep working on her own private practice. She wanted to, continue working on her career. And they saw that the state was directing legal contracts towards Rose Law Firm. And that became kind of compared to everything that came after, I guess, a mini scandal. But basically they asked Hillary Clinton, do you at least see like the appearance of impropriety that you are like working at a law firm that is like receiving legal contracts for representation with the like state agencies, and your husband is the governor of the state. I believe her answer was something like, maybe people wanted a first lady that would be, serving teas and cookies and everything. But that's the thing. This is like textbook Clinton shit. This is like, bro, you can't even be a working woman anymore. What is happening to this patriarchal society that we're living in? You can't even work and be a lady. And it's like, that's not what people are asking. They're asking, do you at least see the conflict of interest of what you're doing? Even if, like you said, we don't even know if they personally profited. And even back then, we didn't know if Hillary had personally profited from these contracts.
Right. No.
Do you at least acknowledge that this looks bad?
If you're a Clinton or a DeSantis, we've talked about this stuff before about like the fraud, a lot of fraud and getting away with stuff on the nonprofit and the tax evasion. Well, it's a lot of it is just an IQ test. And if you're a Clinton or a DeSantis, you probably passed the IQ test. In this case, you fucking didn't. Like, I mean, who was like telling Aka to do this? Like, there's so many other ways to go about if you were just trying to put $10 million into a charity that the governor's wife is like, it's her little crown jewel. There are way smarter ways to do it. I mean, but then again, you could say the same thing about the Clintons and like the foundation and what it did in Haiti, where it was pretty rampant, overt corruption, what they did in Haiti based on everything I've read, at least.
Also,
on Breitbart.
What I read was Governor DeSantis was saying, well, this technically isn't state money. This was a cherry on top donation directly to the foundation as like a make good for wrongdoing. And like, again, do you see the problem with the make good money is going to your wife's foundation? Do you understand why that looks crooked as shit? Even if I accept your story, it looks bad.
It feels like, but like we can sit here and be kind of like, I don't know, dumbfounded by the overt corruption of it. But going back to my original introduction of this topic, it really does feel like we're in this new age of impunity. It feels very like, doesn't fucking matter. Don't even need to hide it. All you got to do is go out there and say that it's the woke media or whatever, like coming after you. And like, that's like, even that low bar of like threshold and just say, oh yeah, we're the tax documents are in the mail. We'll have them any day now. Don't worry about it. And then there just doesn't really seem like, and I'm using this example, obviously, in DeSantis in Florida, where he's kind of all powerful, except for these, rival Republicans nipping at his heels. But like, this is like everything now. This is all of it. All of it is just, if you're on the right side and you've got the right backing, you can just do this stuff in open air.
Which, like, when you're in a one-party state, all that matters is the pecking order within the party. And like, if the reports that Casey DeSantis has political aspirations of her own are true, then this really is the intersection with the Clintons, because if she does have political ambitions, if she wants to run for governor, and let's say she's elected governor, now she has 10 million reasons to maybe take a softer approach with certain, whatever it is.
She won't be, because Trump.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Opponent. Trump already endorsed her opponent. And this guy, DeSantis, who just doesn't understand that he has flown too close to the sun and the wings have burnt off and he's falling slowly but surely. He's basically Scott Walker. He's going to end up at a think tank or some shitty university president or something, but he doesn't get it through his head. So the actual king of the Republicans, for better or for worse, has said, no, I want this guy. Just like I throned DeSantis, this is who I want. And DeSantis doesn't get it, and he's still pushing his wife and bringing her to all of these press conferences and dragging her along and trying to make fetch happen, as the movie says. And fetch ain't going to happen, buddy. And this is 10 million reasons that the legislature is saying, and the Republican Party of Florida, let's make it clear, they're saying, hey, this is 10 million reasons for you to proceed carefully, buddy, because this is criminal exposure. So you and your grifter-ass wife finish your lame duck mandate and get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it's funny. I wonder if an AG Pam Bondi would ever go after her original sort of like benefactor, Ron DeSantis. New master is better than the old master, I suppose. But like,
no, but she was a Trump person before DeSantis. She's an original Trump.
Oh, was she? I guess that's just me. I associate her with DeSantis because
remember that
his cabinet.
She's the person that when Trump University was being investigated in Florida, remember she got a big old, actually it wasn't even that big. It was actually I think it was like a $10,000 donation, and she dropped the investigation. when she was AG back in the day. So she's been with Trump for a little bit, man. She's that she's been greased for a long time.
I don't know anything. I'm not as well informed as you two are on the politics of it, but I do know some of the practicalities of working with ACA. I had a client for years, for 8 years. I had a client that was a very large. If I said the name, you would know who they are. Their names all out there a lot, and they're a huge Medicare Medicaid plan here in Florida, one of the largest, and I started working with them around like 2015, and they, for years, were just kind of a normal client. Like, you needed to do things. They would run it up the pole to their, government affairs and regulatory people to make sure that it was okay with ACA, with the state. And, it takes a little bit more lead time when you're working in comms in an area that's so regulated like that, but that's fine. As soon as DeSantis maybe finished his first year around like 2019 or so, 2020, I should say, everything got so difficult, so political. Every statement or copy or press release that you would draft would have to go through all of this political vetting. And ACA became this hyper politicized entity, which it didn't used to be. I mean, everything is political, but it used to just be more, I don't know, rudimentary or something like that. And it became this big thing where it's like, we can't say that because they might be mad about this, and this news story is out there. And all of a sudden you're like threading the line for every public statement. And
do you remember, we've covered this in the podcast, remember that anti-immigrant report where they tried to show uncompensated healthcare costs related to undocumented people? And then they released this report to lawmakers that show the opposite. And then they released a public report that had all of that information basically taken out. And we were leaked the actual report, the original report that showed that their thing about undocumented immigrants not paying for healthcare was a lie. We released it. It was like a huge scandal because the report cost $500,000, and they had to retract and admit that they had tried to edit the report for political purposes. And then this year they released the same report showing the same thing, but it turns out, and this was just not even a political mistake. This was just a mistake. The numbers in the report, if you added them all together, they didn't add up. Not only is it political, David, as you described, it's also incompetent. And then, you know what? They had the lady that runs ACA, again, a political lackey. They had, I forgot who else, but they had Manny Diaz, the commissioner of education, for some reason, on a table in what looked like a hostage video. Even the Republicans, even Andrade was saying, like, blink. Matt Gaetz tweeted, blink twice if you're under duress. They had them in this basically saying, we don't know why the Republican chair of this committee and the Republicans are going after us, and Hope Foundation does such great work. And why are you picking on us? Why are you bullying us? And it's it is so pathetic. Like, you guys are just bureaucrats that were rolled out and sat in this chair, and the cameras are rolling, and you fucking better say that everything is fine with Hope Foundation without providing any proof of that being the case, or otherwise you're gonna lose your job. It's just so pathetic, honestly. It's third world banana republic shit.
Yeah, this was the statement that came from ACA and Siobhan Harris. It's concerning how little Representative Andrade understands about Medicaid, as demonstrated in his performative committee hearing today. He also purposely misconstrued the structure and nature of the Hope Florida program, which is shameful. Oh, fine, then explain to us what it is.
Right.
Tell us what it does.
Right.
What does it do?
Who have they benefited? Give us numbers. Give us actual substance.
That client that I was telling you about that works in, I'm not trying to say that they're like some great, benevolent force or something like that. They do this for a reason, but they have a community partners network where they go out and they are actually, like, if you mention that name to people who work at food banks in, Ocala or something like that, they would know. They'd be like, oh yeah, they come out and they help out and they donate, or they give us money. They cut checks for us every year. Like, you can track that stuff. You can find human beings that, I'm not like this. What is this? Hope Foundation? I've never heard of them like swooping in to and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I've never heard of them like swooping into like hurricane ravaged parts of Florida and like supplementing, FEMA or anything. I've never heard of them doing anything.
They're supposed to in Southwest Florida, and there's a ton of questions about how much money was actually rolled out and to who and what was dispersed. It's so shady, man.
Yeah, this shit sounds
It
like
was shady
like
to
your
begin
classic
with.
slush fund.
It was shady to begin with, and now it's just extra shady.
Ridiculous. It's yeah, we're in a whole new era of just not having to give a shit about we don't even have to lie anymore. I don't know. Maybe I don't know, guys. Maybe this is the time to make the turn to the right. Maybe we do it now.
No, are you kidding?
Yeah, like come on. You know how much money is sitting on the table? It's crazy.
They're all like again. I was just saying last night. They're all too embarrassed to announce themselves right now. I'm
It's
good.
time to become like a liberal, David. This becomes to become like a
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, actually you're right. Yeah, just send out a million emails and be like, DeSantis must be stopped.
Yeah.
Donate 20
In 2029, like Gen Z is going to become like globalists. Like, oh, they're all going to be like Milton
They are.
Friedman, like aggressive free traders. Like, no, zero.
Mark Carney is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No tariff.
Carney's going to be the Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yep. And I'm kind of there. I'm kind of
taking you to the.
I'm a globalist myself. I want open borders for people and for people, baby. I've always been there.
Yeah, we're gonna have Mark Carney t-shirts in Florida, in Miami. Take you to the carniceria, baby. See what happens now. So yeah, let's talk about it.
We're right. Yeah. Sean Fain can keep his Ross Perot was right.
Yeah, what was that?
What the fuck, man?
That was a weird one.
Wait, what happened? I missed the last thing I saw about Sean Fain was him like saying like I think a week or two ago, hold the line on the tariffs.
He was on a David.
This is good, actually.
So fucking stupid. He was on a
David
a
Sirota's podcast
with a Ross Perot was right T-shirt. Like, come on, man, come on, like, dude.
I was like alive and like aware of everything during Perot's runs, and I just don't like what was his main thing in 92 was if NAFTA passes, you're going to hear a large sucking sound, and that's going to be all the jobs leaving the country, which if you'd been following the trajectory of the country since roughly 1975, basically already happened. But it is just very depressing that to make the point that we should have some form of, if not reindustrialization, just at least have certain sectors of the economy that are domestically produced, you have to reach all the way back to Ross Perot, who had a lot of noxious, would not look at what Javier Milei is doing and think anything like bad of it. Like he picked a pretty bad and old choice for this.
Like a fucking austerity libertarian freak, and you got like, what are you doing, man? And also like NAFTA was bad. It was bad, right? But like the genesis, I don't want to get too into it, but the genesis of NAFTA was actually under Ronald Reagan, and it was the North American Free Trade Union that was supposed to actually be a Schengen area that encompassed Mexico, Canada, and the United States. And that's where the Amero comes from. The Amero is not just like some like weird conspiracy thing. It's actually something that came out from the Reagan administration. And it was supposed to have free movement of people within these three countries. And it was basically developed, taken by the Clinton administration. And they're the ones that took out the free movement of people and kept all the horrible elements, which is like the freaking, free movement of capital between these like non-leveraged economies, and decimated, Mexican agriculture, etc., whatever. But like, like that, like it's a little more complicated than saying Ross Perot was right. You know what I mean? Like it's a little more complicated than that. And Ross Perot is awful. Like he is a libertarian austerity freak, man. Like you're like the leader of the UAW. Like you should not be so fucking flippant about wearing a shirt like that. It's embarrassing.
It's like when the people who were trying to make the case against oligarchy or whatever were talking about, like they would quote Ronald Reagan saying that Wall Street should pay their fair share. And it's like, don't do that. Like you don't have to like make like Ronald Reagan like an Occupy Wall Street figure to make your point. Yeah. Like it actually does more harm to your movement.
To quote Drill regarding the group ISIS, you have to hand it to them.
You do not, in fact.
Okay, you do not.
A lot of what this moment reminds me of right now is like the old. I remember there was a George R. Martin, the way that he wrote one time in one of his books. He wrote about
back when he wrote books.
Back when he wrote books, he had pages. When he had pages,
he didn't make video games.
He didn't make fucking blog posts about the Jets' free agency moves. But back then, he had one of his books where he was talking about slavery. And about the idea of like how sinister slavery is, sinister, yeah, in terms of like you're subjugating an entire people to work for free, and everything awful that comes with that. But even when you do eventually get to a point where you're like, okay, well, this is wrong, we have to get rid of it. It's like cancer. It's like an addiction. You can't extricate it from the economy easily, but you end up with stuff like, decades of reconstruction, painful, awful reconstruction. And that's kind of what it almost feels like. The most ardent Trump tariff supporters are trying to say, like, yeah, that's what we need. We need like 30 years of difficult, hard times to get like ourselves off of, free labor from almost free labor from the global South.
This is almost line by line the Groyper pitch on this.
Yeah.
Because those hard times create strong men, David. Don't you know? Like, basically, I mean, at least they're consistent. I mean, they're racist, but at least they're
racist,
yeah.
but they're consistent. But like this necessary period of deprivation and difficulty and like basically reconstruction, like weaning ourselves off of the cheap labor of the global South. Gerald was making the point that like, yeah, that's the Groyper fucking mentality right now, where they're like, it's like, well, you say it, Gerald, you were the one saying.
They look at all the stock markets go down and say, good, these hard times will create strong men. Like, there was always going to be a period of pain. We got to wean ourselves off these cheap consumer goods that are turning us soy until we learn how to basically go full American juche and make all of our own products.
Oh, that's not. You think that's a winning message with the?
Yeah.
I don't, but it's their message.
Expectancy 52 again.
I mean, you want to get into a trade war with a country that has like almost double your population, holds like a lot of your debt, is a manufacturer giant,
only relies on you for about 3% of their exports in the larger and that's on the high side. It's probably closer.
And it's a totalitarian state that's largely immune to public opinion, like
public sentiment. They can just tell people to suck it up and deal with it, whatever pain comes down the path.
Well, also alienating all of your possible like trade allies by literally threatening to invade them.
And if you're planning on turning to Evropa, every European country is now cutting a tariff deal with the Chinese for their electric vehicles. Yeah. So good luck, even if you get out, good luck escaping.
This is something that we've been saying on this podcast for a long time. I mean, I am the anti-China member of this podcast. David is
of the three of us, I would say yes.
No, David is the pro-China. He does.
I've got my other passport coming in the mail.
I'm the China centrist for sure.
Yeah. So we have the spectrum here, but we've also said that
I'm a apologist.
The next century is going to be the Chinese century. I don't think none of us could have seen it that it was going to be like this. It's like, remember that scene in The Matrix, the first one, when they unplug not like this, not like this.
Yeah, not like this. Yeah, not like this.
I thought when it happened, it would just happen, like not with a bang, but with a whimper. Yeah. But Trump is like, no, it's going to be a big bang. And then another
what's the Lenin quote? There's decades where nothing happens, and decades happen.
Yes.
What is the quote from Michael Scott when he founded the Michael Scott Paper Company, and he was talking to David, and he was like, I don't think I have to outweight the company. I think I just have to outweight you. And that's basically what Xi is saying to Trump, because Xi's going to be around a lot longer than Trump will.
That's why you come to this podcast. You have Michael Scott and Lenin quotes in the same breath.
In the same breath.